Ms. Scott, do you want to go ahead and do the roll call for this 1:00 p.m. Central Virginia Transportation Authority Technical Advisory Committee meeting today, please?
Yes, ma'am. I still have some members joining. Give me just a minute to finish moving them over, and then we'll do that.
Awesome, thank
I'm
you.
here. A minute too late, but I'm here.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Chet, were we able to reach out to Powhatan?
Yes, talked with Mr. Chardine, and I know that there's some staffing issues, so they're to do the best they can.
Okay.
Okay, hold on one second. And all right, Town of Ashland, Miss Amos,
Here.
Miss Ragland. Charles City County, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell,
Here.
thank you. Miss Russell. Chesterfield County Vice Chair Smith. Miss Walker.
Here.
Goochland County, Mr. Goyne.
Here.
Mr. Coleman. Hanover County, Mr. Vidunez.
Here.
Mr. Hardman. Henrico County, Mr. Yor.
Here.
Miss Smidler.
Here.
New Kent County, Miss Inman.
Here.
Miss Leduc. Powhatan County, Mr. Ciriello. Mr. Chardine. City of Richmond, Miss Chair Clark.
Here.
GRTC, Mr. Adarkwa. Miss Robinson. Plan RVA, Mr. Bushing.
Here.
RMTA, Miss Dean.
Here.
DRPT, Miss Dubinsky.
Here.
Mr. Wagner. VDOT, Mr. Totten.
Here.
Mr. Riblet.
Here.
Miss McAdory.
Here.
Virginia Port Authority, Miss Nelson.
Here.
And I believe that will do it. That concludes the roll call for attendance. We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Again, welcome to everybody to today's meeting. Do we have any consideration of amendments to the agenda? Hearing none, let's move on to item 4, approval of our January 8th TAC meeting minutes. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes?
I move for approval. Gary.
Thank you. Did I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Gore. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor vote aye.
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 All those opposed? No. Great, that item is approved. Public comment period. Do we have any emails or indication of someone wanting to speak from the public, Chet or Ms. Scott?
No, ma'am, we
No.
haven't received any.
We don't have any indications, but I did want to take this as an opportunity to introduce Mr. Winfrey from Goochland County, who's one of our new authority members following the November election. So welcome, Mr. Winfrey. Let us know if you have any questions as we move forward.
Thank you.
All right. Hi, Mr. Winfrey.
Hi.
All right. So with that, we are moving to item 6, TAC Chair's Report. I think I may have something. Let me see here. Well, I think most of today we're excited about what we're going to get to work on in regard to the CVTA Regional Project Cycle Round 3 analysis that came out of our cost benefit that we're required to do. So I think we're all excited to see to see the results and to really get it out to the public and get as much feedback as we can. So with that, I will keep with the agenda and go on to the fall line trail updates, which is item 7. And I don't know if VDOT wants to lead that, or Mr. Parsons, if you would like to start that.
Yeah, I'll just take this chance to share that I've been having conversations with Mr. Fisher specifically about the Design Build 2 project, and I think there's some great updates that we should be getting soon. Though Fall Work Group meets on Wednesday, but I did want to reach out to Mark today to see if there was anything that VDOT wanted to share at this point.
So, Chet, Design Build 2 and 3 updates?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so for Design Build 2, good progress on the alignment, especially adjacent to Virginia State. We'll have additional information that we can present to the Fall Line Trail Working Group at their upcoming meeting here in a few days. I will tell you, again, Design Build 3, like we've talked in previous meetings, really doesn't have any funding on it at this point. So I kind of lump that into all of the other segments that are unfunded right now or have deficits on that. The good news is we have information back from WRA relative to their latest view of the estimates. Our staff here is reviewing that to make sure that we concur with the way that's being presented. We anticipate probably tomorrow being able to get that honestly to Chesterfield and Richmond, just the localities that are most impacted by that, so that they have an opportunity to see that prior to the Fall Line Trail Working Group meeting. I know that's cutting it short, but that was the commitment that we had provided before, that we would certainly let those localities give it an eyeball beforehand. No surprise, the recommendation at this point is certainly that we do have a funding gap out there, but we at this point are certainly going to be looking for kind of feedback from the localities that might have more specific information on those unfunded segments at this point. But good progress on Design Build 2 and good information that we'll be able to share with the working group after we share it with the impacted localities. At this point, happy to answer any questions, but that's what we have for this morning. Or this afternoon, excuse me.
Great, thanks, Mark. And I just a quick wayfinding plan update. We are continuing to work with AB Design to fine-tune some particular sections, working on destination lists, in particular with a number of the impacted jurisdictions, so that the specifications can be fine-tuned for the locations. And that's going to be a topic of discussion at Wednesday's Fall Line Work Group as well. Madam Chair, that's all I have, unless there's any other questions on that.
Any questions for Chet or Mark? Hearing none. We will go on to item 8. Mr. Parsons and Mr. Bushing.
Yes, thank you very much. So we are now at the point where we have gone through almost an entire cycle for our regional project funding. And this meeting is the intended purpose of the majority of this meeting is to go through the scoring that is set forth in the regional framework that the TAC has developed. The scoring is based on a number of different things. The revised cost estimates. We've been through that process. The last TAC meeting, everybody agreed to move forward with a set of cost estimates, and there's reasoning behind each of those. Staff has used the model that's been established through the regional framework with the 5 different benefit metrics to apply a benefit score for each project application. We've used the revised cost estimates to then develop a cost benefit score. And the purpose of all of this is to provide the Central Virginia Transportation Authority background information that they need to make an informed decision at their next meeting on February 23rd in terms of regional project application or allocations, not applications, allocations for the round 3 funding amounts. So there's 3 items on the agenda under new business today, or under item 8. These are all pertaining to round 3 of the project cycle. The first is an information item to update TAC on the cost benefit scoring process and the results that followed the adopted project selection and allocation framework. So we'll look through the scorecards. This was distributed, but it's also on page 7 in the agenda packet if anybody needs to refer to it. The next item, 8B, is taking those scorecards and the assumption that the highlighted projects are the recommended projects for funding awards. How would that slot into our already established allocations plan? So it's taking a look at our existing, essentially 6-year plan and looking at the new projects from round 3 and how they would slot into different components depending on the project needs themselves to go through FY30. And then finally, the last item, 8C, is a requested action to approve a funding scenario number 3 for public review. And I will get into all of those in more detail as we move through. So the first one, item 8A, would it help if I shared on the screen, or is it better to see each other and refer to your packets? Madam Chair, do you have a preference?
You could share on the screen, please.
Okay. All right, so I'm starting on page 7, and I will do that now. All right. Everybody see that? So the first item, the round 3 regional application scorecards, we started out with an overview memo, kind of refreshing everyone on the framework, the allocations framework, and the data development that went into developing the scorecards themselves. So just quickly going through that, this shouldn't be new information for most of us. We are focused now on the 35% revenues that the CVTA collects. This is not focused on GRTC distributions or local distributions. We have landed on a funding cycle that is every 2 years to coincide with the smart scale applications window, so that these allocation decisions can hopefully positively impact smart scale applications. The limits, all locality members are eligible to submit requests for CVTA regional funding. The number of applications allowed per locality member is 2 times the weighted voting. So there is actually in the framework itself a table, I believe, that shows the number of applications. We have 7 different project categories now, which you'll see in the scorecards: highway, bicycle, pedestrian, transit, multimodal, bridge, planning studies, and then preliminary engineering. The project screening, there are a number of criteria that go through in the initial application process to look at the applications, see if they meet all the criteria for moving on in the process. Those include things like a well-defined scope, using VDOT's cost estimating workbook. People who are listening in, if you've heard us talk about the cube, that's the cost estimating workbook. An application usually includes supporting data and studies that have been developed. It identifies whether the project will be administered by the locality or if VDOT will do the administration. And then if the project is in the RRTPO, Long Range Transportation Plan, or if it's in the process of being included. So everything we're going to be talking about today has passed all of those criteria and was included in the evaluation process. Then we do the project scoring and ranking. This is a modified version of the process that the Richmond Regional TPO uses to evaluate long-range plan projects. It looks at a smaller number of criteria, including safety, mobility, and accessibility, both through economic development and equity lenses. The goal weights for each of those goals is shown on the screen in the table. Safety and accessibility being the highest at 38.5% each. And then the performance measures. So what are all of the impacts of each project application that can be measured with data to provide that foundation for both for tax use and for the elected officials to move forward with. So things like crash frequency and crash rates, person hours of delay, access to destinations, both from an overall standpoint and an environmental justice population standpoint. So all of those factors go into the scoring and weighting to develop the benefit scores. Bridges are a standalone scoring tool using state of good repair factors, and that is a fairly straightforward process, looking at importance, condition, design redundancy, all the SGR things. So then we move into project selection, which is really focused on developing the allocations table and where particular projects and phasing can apply with already selected CVTA allocations. So that's what we're looking at under item 8B today. And then again, the allocations itself, our goal is to look out at least 6 years and to focus on additional funding for program phases of active projects, next phase of existing projects, and new projects. So that is all contained in the allocations tables, and we'll provide more detail as we move through that. So with that being said as background, Madam Chair, is any questions from the committee on that? I'd be happy to move into the scorecards.
Do we have
Okay,
any
I will.
questions? All right, go ahead, check.
Thank you. I'm going to start with the first one, which is page 11, and this is the bicycle pedestrian scorecards. So the way the scorecards are laid out, it's very similar to round 2. We did have some requests to more clearly identify the projects that were recommended for funding awards. So what you see here is the first 3 projects on the list that are highlighted in green are the ones that are recommended for funding or for inclusion in the allocations plan. That'd be better said. What you see across the table, starting from the left, the project ID, the title, the sponsoring locality, the category, and then we have the scoring in terms of the 3 different major categories: safety, mobility, and access. Those all sum into the benefit score. So you can see the benefit score for each project and the benefit rank. It may not be 1 to 4, top to bottom, because the way these projects are sorted is in terms of the overall category. Moving from benefit rank to the right, you see the CVTA request. This was the estimates that were verified through the third-party consultant, as well as feedback from the TAC. One thing to note, when you see the bolded request, as in the Commerce Road Fall Line Phase 2, that is actually the total amount of funding on the project. The actual request is for this project is a leveraging request for round 3. And for this particular project, it's shown in the allocations table under item 8B. But for your information, the leveraging request for round 3 was just over $13 million, in addition to funds that have been allocated in a previous round. So the way these projects are ranked top to bottom is based on the cost benefits. So we take the CVTA requests and then balance that with the benefit, and you get the category rank and the overall score on the far right side. The bottom of the table at the bottom right shows the funding for each category. Using the framework, we are guided to develop a suggested percentage for each round based on the number of project applications and the amounts that were submitted for things like, bike ped versus bridge versus highway. So that is what you see under round percentage. The available number, the second to the bottom line, is the total amount of funding through our PAYGO model that we expect to be available for this round 3. And then I think that's it. So each table is the same way. I'm going to ask Miles to jump in at this point to see if there's any clarification needed or any other details on the way the tables are organized.
This is Dirana here. I think that if we could get the exact numbers of the requests for those that were bolded, Chet, that would be helpful.
Sure, I can jump to that. Well, you want to just say it out loud? It's in the packet. It will be.
No, I can look in the package.
Yeah, so that project, the requested amount was $13,550,071 for the bike ped for the Commerce Road project.
Mr. Ure?
The Chet, I think for future purposes, it would be helpful to add another column on these score sheets we're looking at, because of it does have the benefit and score and stuff on here. If we could add a separate column that just shows the CVTA request for that particular round in addition to the total CVTA request, because that and ultimately I found it, and thank you to you and Miles for sending that, but it kind of took some piecing together to kind of figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that, Todd. We can certainly add that, and we can plug it in before this moves on in this process as well.
Joe?
If I could add to that request, I'd also say somewhere on here have the total project cost.
Okay.
I have Ms. Inman and then Jessa.
Hey, thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. Just a quick question for clarification. So I understand that the CVTA has really wanted to focus these, the regional dollars for leveraging. I don't know if that's a solid policy, that's a strict rule, but if that is the general consensus of, the use of these funds, then will these bike ped projects even score in smart scale, or what other pots of money would they be going after? Because it's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the bike ped projects will no longer really be funded through smart scale. So if these are leveraging dollars that we're going to be tying up, what other sources of funding would they be going after? And that's
Sure,
just a general question.
I can jump in, Madam Chair, to explain the projects in this particular list. So the first 2 projects on here, the Hull Street Shared Use Path and the Richmond Highway Fall Line Trail Improvements projects, are both actually existing projects. So this is funding to help fund a project that's already been funded through the Smart Scale program. So that in that case, we don't have to worry about future rounds of Smart Scale with those 2. It's actually helping to move the project forward and get completed. For the third project, it is a future Smart Scale application. This project is not exclusively bike ped, it's also access management and some streetscape improvements along the corridor as well. So it's still going to be eligible. And I think to the broader point, bicycle and pedestrian projects are still going to be eligible under the district grant program. It's just for the high priority projects, which is like the TPO and GRTC and Plan RVA applications, where we won't be seeing those as frequently. So I think it still has a chance to compete. It'd just be under a Richmond City application rather than an RTPO application.
Thank you.
Good question, Amy. Ms. Walker?
I lowered my hand. I was gonna jump on the column clarification request to, so we had add a column showing the total estimate, add a column showing CVTA request round 3.
Yes.
And I was gonna request we add a column for the existing leveraging amount, but Miles is shaking his head yes, so I'll leave it. I'll add that request on. Trying not to do any math, you guys, at the end if it's all in the tables.
Sure.
Existing
And
leverage column.
I can just add one other comment, Madam Chair. The rationale and why we were showing it the way that we did all together is really because the benefit score, the cost benefit score, is based on the total amount leveraged. So that's why they're not all separated out. We were trying to make a pretty clear picture of like, hey, you're asking for 40 million. It's, you know, not the previous money and the new money. I definitely understand when we're making the decisions, though, that there's a difference between asking for 10 million more versus $40 million. So we can definitely clean that up.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a hand up at VDOT.
And just one thing that may be helpful also would be if we have existing projects, maybe to include the UPC in the project title, just to be able to know whether or not it's referring to an existing project that's already there or a new one that may be in a future application.
Thank you, Mr. Riblet. Good suggestion.
Okay. Should I go on to the next scorecard?
Let's go to the next scorecard.
All right, so that was bike ped. In terms of studies, there was one application that was under the study category. And that was a Hanover application for 360 Walnut Grove. The next scorecard is for PE only. You can see a similarity here that there was a 360 Walnut Grove application under PE only as well. And that and the I-95 and Perham interchange both scored highest overall in terms of cost benefit to be recommended to move forward into the allocation package. There were 4 total applications in this category. And I'm just gonna keep moving forward, and if anybody has questions about anything in particular, please jump in. In terms of the highways on page 14 and 15, as you can see, the majority of the regional project applications were in the highway category. There were 10 projects that are there at the top in green that are recommended to move forward based on the cost benefit score, which again is what is contained in the framework. The benefit rankings are different when you factor in the cost estimate and the request in 2023 dollars. There are a handful of projects, including one that's recommended at this point to move forward for Whole Street Phase 2 that is leveraged. So that is not the total amount. That's the total amount of the project, not the amount requested for this round. I'm trying to find that. That amount requested was $5,235,060. So those projects in green are the ones that score according to the framework, and this is what staff has put together to reflect that guidance. As you can see, there are a lot of projects in the highway list that did not make it in. Some with very good benefit scores, some also with very high price tags. So there are reasons for each in terms of why it shook out like it did. And then I guess looking at the bottom, the data on this scorecard for highways, 76% of the applications were in this category. So that's the recommended general split for award for allocation is 76% should be the guide to go to highway projects. Yeah, Miles, any additional thoughts on that? Just quickly, the transit projects are next. There were 3 projects that were in the transit category. North-South BRT ranked number 1 when you go back to look at cost benefit. But they were all very unique and necessary projects in their own right. And then the final, oh, that's it.
Chet,
So I do see hands, yes.
yep. I think I see Chessa's first, but I can't tell.
Thank
Chessa?
you. Thank you, Ms. Chair. So Chet, if you, stay right here on highway. So the summary of the total dollars requested for the green, the 10 green projects. And I know it's going to be a little less because the 10th one shows 11,000,007, but the request is only 5 million and change or something, right, for that one, this round?
Right.
Okay, so if I were to sum up the total requested dollars in green, assuming the 11 million at the end there, it's like 81 million.
Yeah,
And
I'm
then
sharing my screen. Miles, can you verify?
Miles,
Yeah,
do you
so-
know what I'm getting at? And then the
Yes.
the
Yeah.
rough share amount.
I can
Okay.
address it. So
Thank you.
basically, so this is in current dollars. So once you program them into the actual allocations plan, put it in the cube and get inflation, that pushes it up a little bit more. So I
Gotcha.
think it winds up closer to 100. What happened at the end essentially is to be able to fund a transit project. It really came down to the transit project, but to be able to fund the transit project, we would not be able to meet the highway ratio exactly. So we had less than the next project on the highway list, which is why we wound up with a 3rd bicycle and pedestrian project. So we should have had 2 bike ped projects and one of the transit projects, but essentially because of the costs were slightly higher in those categories than their share, the highway category is slightly lower.
And just to reiterate the
And
inflation information. So what you're seeing on the scorecards is different than what you're going to see on the allocations because the scorecards reflect current dollars, so we can compare all the projects in terms of just the raw scores. And then when we look at allocations, some projects will be 26, some will be 29. Those are all inflated at that point with the inflation numbers so that we have a more reasonable estimate of what the dollars would be.
Gotcha. And if you were, Miles, going to follow the rough share, which is the guidance is it's just a guide in as far as the rough share calculation. If you were to follow that, you wouldn't have a transit project. So to have one transit project.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
The lowest
No.
cost transit project, even
Right.
uninflated, cost more than the
rough share.
So
Got
the thought was balancing it out to try and select one of those transit projects, and then to try and get 2 of the bike ped projects, and then at that point, and I think the PE category was also over. So the 3 other categories all wound up slightly higher than their share, which reduced the total for highway.
Got it. Thank you. That's what I needed to know.
All right, I have Ms. Inman and then Mr. Ure.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a couple of questions. So number 1, again, getting back to the leveraging question, are all of the projects in green, are they expected to be applied for in smart scale? And if so, will they pass the project readiness test? And if not, then is that something that needs to be known in advance of awarding the money, or at least that be an item? And I understand that CVTA didn't evaluate the projects based on whether they're smart scale ready, but that kind of, I guess it implies that if we're leveraging money towards smart scale, and that's what this whole process has been geared up for, then the projects would all, would be eligible and be ready to, meet the screening criteria. So I think, that's one question. The other question is, the precedent of funding projects that don't have quite the benefit. Even though the cost is low, they don't have the benefit that the other projects do have. So I think that's a real serious question that we need to talk about. I mean, obviously every project on here has merit, but the benefit of the project is really kind of what we're all after, right? Is what are the improvements at the end of the day going to deliver for our people, for the citizens, and for safety, mobility, access, etc. So I think that really needs to be a question that we discuss here. And if not, then I think we need to be honest about that and potentially think about a different way of looking at these projects that would be fair and equitable. The other thing that I'm just going to point out, and Miles, I understand that you're saying that there wasn't enough money to fully fund the 106 project, so you just allocated that money to other projects. But again, I would look at, are those other projects going to be leveraged for smart scale, and what is the project readiness factor on those projects? Because I mean, we do have a project that's ready to move forward, and it's a very key project from an economic development perspective. And not just that, but that project is going to solve for a 4.5 mile backup on I-64 in 2027. That's what the that's what our congestion shows, right? That's going to be backing up onto the main line, onto I-64. That's 2024. 2047, it's 5 mile backup, right? And that's just one project. That's just with the Buc-ee's project. We have other major economic development projects coming in. AutoZone, we have a $1.4 million or 1.4 million square foot project that's going to be happening in that same vicinity. In addition to all the other development that's anticipated to come as a result of Buc-ee's. So when we look at that, we just want to understand how our project was, scored for each individual category and each individual measure. But then also, is it fair to take the money away and put it on other projects just because, we couldn't fully fund? Could we have a discussion about, what that looks like? But those, I think, are the questions that we have. And I don't know if any of that's going to get solved here today, but I think it's something that both between now and the time that this program is voted on needs to be reconciled. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And what I can say to ease everyone anxiety, as we all have with our passionate in our counties and in our city, is that this list is what will go in front of the authority members, irregardless of it was our job to rank them based on the cost benefit. And typically, as in some of our other funding programs, the methodology of going down the list and then the next ask, that has been at least institutionalized with the TPO in that process. But the good thing is that, again, we aren't the TPO. And so this is based on, this listing and the ranking of the table is based on benefit cost. And it is not, we are not approving this list. We are approving it to be put out to the public. That is part of the law, in which says, based on the cost benefit analysis that we have created and done, this is the project list. But much like what the CTP does, they can take that list and mix it around to however they want to mix it around. And you know, we can't do that necessarily, but they can. And I think that this gets the list out to the public to review, and for your localities to have the public provide input on projects on this list, irregardless of the staff's recommendation of this is how we can spend $151 million. So if that helps any, Amy, but and again, not all of these are going to smart scale. We do have other leveraging sources that we're hoping to, I know at least the city hoping to utilize for the transit. And you know, Amira, a different, you know, we hope inclusive of smart scale, but there are other funding opportunities out there. And we always said with the wild cards is that what is important and can be an economic driver for a locality, you know, and it makes it important to them, is the one reason we even have that category there. And so to then let you know, with the scoring and the different things, it's just, you know, we didn't, to me, they follow the process, but I will,
Oh, let me clarify. Sorry, Madam Chair. I'm not saying they didn't follow the process. I'm just pointing out that these are questions that I think are worthwhile. I'm not saying that the process was not followed or that the staff did not properly score these projects. I'm simply merely pointing out some of the questions and some of the things I think we need as a region and as a body to think about.
thank you for that clarification for me. And so I guess, Chet, what we could potentially work on is explaining in words and not like the numbers, potentially just how this, you know, because I don't know if it's discovery area to help people submit better applications, or if it's you know, it's something, but maybe describing, but right now, like, it's hard to say, you know, put safety above any category because we're the directives say cost benefit. And so, you know, I would encourage each individual localities to go into those specific measures and look at those. We tried to make it as equitable, but you know, we have a annual review of the policy, and I think we already have parking lot items, and we will be glad to add that item to the parking lot, Amy, so that we can improve our process as much as we can through the different rounds, and getting out a good, you know, system that gives us good projects that benefit everyone in the region. Okay, I am going to go over to Mr. Ewer and then Joe.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that, I guess, high level perspective on things. So talking about process, and since we have Ms. Walker on here, the brain trust of the scoring method we use. And I don't think this showed up on round 2 because we really didn't have much in the way of transit projects. There was a hybrid one that the city submitted, but I don't know if that was under transit or highways because it was a combination of both. But if Chad, if you can go to the transit page, I'll make my point and try to be brief here. So our policy as it stands is we're awarding roughly the percentage of I guess number of projects and dollar value of projects submitted for a category. So we have 3 transit projects, and probably by definition we're not going to generally get a lot of transit projects relative to highway projects and maybe bike ped projects. So we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot for focusing on regional transit, which I would argue all three of these projects are. And if you look at both on the benefit side and the score side, if you look at the Pulse extension, which unquestionably is a regional project, it scored 37, which is higher than all but two of the highway projects that are recommended for funding. The next closest one is a 30, which is the third ranked project for the 288 southbound auxiliary lane. So it's maybe to the casual observers seems a little bit arbitrary that we're maybe favoring highway over transit because of that policy guideline. So I would put that on our to-do list when after we go through this process, to maybe revisit how we cross check these different categories and what we fund in that fund, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, and I agree with that only, well, for two reasons, in that the cube or CEWB did not work well for transit category, in my opinion, at all. And so that's going to be on one of my items in for the parking lot, to see how we have better cost estimates for transit projects, because the cube was really highway centric. And I'm not sure if that's what yielded the 0 score, or if I think it's for the transit hub, or if it was there's an existing temporary place there now. But I do think that having some good factors for transit for this process would probably be good.
Madam Chair, can I jump in with a little bit more on the technical side with the transit discussion?
Sure, Joe, 1 second, please.
Just to follow up on Todd's comments and your comments, one thing to note is that each category's benefit score and benefit rank is relative only to the projects in that category. So you can't compare directly the transit benefits and cost benefit scores to the highway benefit and cost benefit scores, because the way that we do the normalization is only amongst other transit projects. That said, I will note that I think in both of the BRT projects would have scored very well even against all the highway projects had they been compared directly. So that's one thing. And then to your other comment about the downtown transit hub, part of that is the bottom project in each metric gets 0 points, since it's a normalizing 100 to 0. So it scored less than the two BRT projects in every category. So it's not there's no benefit to the project. It's the bottom of the 3 transit projects for each of the 8 measures that we looked at.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Vadunas? Yeah, you're on mute, sir.
Yes, thank you. Do you mind flipping to the highway score sheet? I just wanted to get clarification on something Amy said. Perhaps I misunderstood, but I thought Amy said that, these projects that are highlighted in green are being submitted as leveraging through perhaps Smart Scale or other funding programs. And I don't believe that's the case, at least not with the Hanover project that's not in green. But I guess it's a question. Are all of these leveraging projects, or some of these just standalone requests that are highlighted in green?
Yeah, Joe, I think that was Amy's question as well, which I don't know if I can answer.
Joe,
I
the county's got
the
one project in there that is fully funded. The Fairground Road, Mains Road intersection is not a leverage application. That is a fully funded application.
Yeah, I'm not asking which are which. I thought I misunderstood, obviously, because I thought I heard her say that all of these were leveraging requests, and I didn't think that was the case.
No, I was asking the question.
I got
if
you.
If they were, because it was my understanding that that's kind of the general policy of CVTA. And the question was, are all of these being submitted for smart scale for leverage?
They're not. Thank you.
Very good discussion. What's some of our next steps, Chet?
So the next step is to, based on what you've seen in the scorecards, is to now talk about the allocations. So if I can, I'll go move on to that. All of this builds into a decision about, are we comfortable to release this for public review?
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to make sure that, and I guess, what, because I'm trying to figure out the highlighted in green, and we're putting this out for public review. And is the review asking them to concur with the green, or to, here's the list of projects submitted ranked by cost benefit to review?
Yes, the second point is
Okay,
the action today is not to say that TAC endorses this list and the way the scorecards worked out. The action is that TAC is essentially accepting the scorecards based on the regional framework scoring guidance and wants to put it out for public review before the authority has it on their plate.
okay. Ms. Inman and then Mr. Ure.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm glad you brought that up, Madam Chair, because I think how it's presented to the public is going to be important, and maybe highlighting it in green might give the impression that we are asking for sort of just, I guess, public comment or input on those projects. I think potentially either taking that highlighted green off or putting a pretty strong disclaimer or wording on, the public outreach materials that sort of explains that, these projects are out for consideration and will ultimately be approved by, CVTA board at, later in the month. So that it's just clear that it's not a TAC endorsement of these projects in this ranking. And I think that's going to be very important. The other piece of that is we did ask, and we would like to see the individual score breakdowns for our project. And I know I just asked for that this morning because I was trying to get to it in the spreadsheet that was sent out, and I couldn't get there. So we would like to see the scoring of our project broken down by individual measure, so that we understand, where we stood on that. So my vote will be I guess I'll just clarify, my vote would be to approve this based on all of those conditions and our ability to be able to review our individual scores for all of the measures.
Thank you, Ms. Inman. Mr. Ure?
Yeah, and thank you for the clarification on what's going out to the public, but another question related to that. So I guess this is more for Chet. Are we sending this out as here's the list of projects across all categories as one list, or is it being kind of presented as it is here minus the green shading by category? Because as it's confusing enough for some of us on this call, and this is what we do, kind of cross comparing the different categories of projects. I guess I'm curious as to how it's going to be presented to the public and how they'll be able to understand all that.
Sure, happy to answer that. So if you remember back to round 2, we did a table of projects and a map when we had public review for that. It will be a very similar thing, except we're recommending against doing a map because it was very hard to read and understand the scale and scope of each project that way. So looking ahead in the packet at page 19, this is what will be sent out. Essentially, it's a table with a detailed project description about what the project is, the category, the sponsor, the current dollar estimate, the request, and then the expected award. So that's starting on page 20 in the agenda packet. So it wouldn't include the scorecards. That's not, I mean, if the public wants to come back to look at the TAC minutes or the TAC meeting, that would be available, obviously, but we didn't feel like the scorecards, we haven't done that in the past, and not sure that that is information that's, I think, kind of what Amy was saying. It's not easy to digest if you don't have a whole lot of background in terms of what went into it.
Thank you. So just for clarification, it would be like the pages starting on 20, but you wouldn't have the green shading on it.
If that's the preference. I mean,
But what
for
about
the
the
committee,
expected?
my concern is if you have the whole list, people will assume that all of the projects are going to be funded. So I don't know. Yeah.
So my thing, I mean, I think the column that says expected award, and so I guess, and I guess it's two parts, because I know in transit world with like a POP, we put out, this is our, this is our projects that we want. There wouldn't be an expected award column because then that is deciphering. So I guess what we're getting, I think what's happening is that last round, we really approved like an allocation table. And so this is, this, so yeah, if you keep the expected award column, then it's an allocation and it's a recommended awards, as the top of this said. And I don't know if it sounds like TAC is not at the recommended awards stage, because maybe it's not even our place to recommend. I don't know. I guess it is because we're trying to advise them. But with this being a little different time frame than last year, we had more finance, either the directors working group or interaction with the finance committee before we okayed these, before we did this allocation award. And I remember asking you, Chet, we're gonna do this before it goes to finance. And so this is still one of it worries me a little bit. Amy?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to echo that. I think it's premature to put that out because it will, I mean, like we've just said, we're approving the list to go out for public review and comment. We're not approving the awards at this point. So
TAC's
to
job is
send,
not to approve the awards.
so I think you need to not have that on there. I think that probably
It says
needs
it
to
on
come
there.
out. So I'm in agreement with what our chairperson is saying.
Miles and then Chessa.
Sure. I just wanted to provide a little clarification. So our approach, what we were taking with this is very similar to the smart scale approach, whereas there's the staff recommended scenario, which breaks down in that cost benefit scores, which ones will be funded, which isn't ultimately necessarily what comes out of the CTB. So the idea is we followed the process. These are the projects that would be funded by the process, but there's a second part to the process that's not strictly this cost benefit analysis. So that's kind of the approach of what we were taking, which is why that said recommended award, because it's really just, this is from the cost benefit, what staff did in the analysis, this is where it shook out. And then there's the second part where, based on the public review, based on the discussions at the authority level, they make a different decision potentially. So I think that was the way we were trying to frame it for the discussion. If that doesn't work, we're happy to pull it out. But that was the intent behind it. Was very similar to what goes on with Smart Scale.
Yeah, Miles. And I think that, and I think the uncomfortability of the group, it may not make it out of TAC today.
Right. You won't.
So,
No,
so yeah, so I'm just saying that, yeah, so I'll go to Chessa.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing. What are we required to take out to the public? Less the green is just a list of candidate projects, or are we supposed to take out for comment? Here's a cut at what we intend to, or what we recommend for funding, and we want comment on that. So do you want what are we required to take out for public comment? So,
Very good.
Madam Chair, can I jump in?
Yes, sir.
So the responsibility of TAC is to develop the scoring framework, which you've done really well. The framework is then applied to all the vetted project applications, which is done. I think TAC's responsibility, in my opinion, as executive director, is the TAC's responsibility is to say, all right, here's how each of the project applications scored according to the framework that we've adopted, very black and white process. We want the public to take a look at this before the elected officials make a decision one way or the other on whether they support a list of projects that scored well according to the framework, or if there are other, human reasons why something else should be considered.
But is that with the expected award?
It's up to you whether we include that or not in the public review.
Okay. Mr. Ure and then Mr. Going.
And thank you, Madam Chair. So, Miles, I appreciate your comparison to the smart scale process, but I would venture that this is different because what we have here is just like with smart scale, you have the staff recommended scenario, but the difference between CVTA and smart scale is you now have a technical advisory committee in between staff and the CTB. Kind of mixed in with the public comment period, and so I think that's what we're struggling with here is if what we're looking at on page 20 and through whatever goes out to the public, then that's staff recommended but not TAC recommended, and that's going to get very confusing to both the public and to the CVTA members. So I would strongly advise that if this is what we want to send out to the public, we revise it to take off recommended awards and the expected award amount and take out the green shading and have the full list. Maybe I'll throw this out to the group. We could have the benefit rank and the benefit cost rank, if that would add clarity to the public, but I think that's open to discussion.
I would support that if we include the rankings, Madam Chair. I mean, I don't want to provide inaccurate information that, the last ranked project is the priority based on the scoring criteria.
The only issue we have with that is what I brought up earlier is we now have different categories with kind of apples and oranges benefits and rankings. So how we marry that up, I'm not sure.
Is there a way, Miles, that I don't know, is there a way I don't know.
We could separate the table so it shows each category criteria.
Yeah, I was gonna say, was there a way to see the benefit costs all together? And we may just need to do it as a TAC exercise as we look to update the framework. I don't know. Like, I don't know. But Mr. Goin, you've been patient. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I do agree generally that it should follow a smart scale like process. I think that one thing that, Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it makes sense to follow that because all TAC is putting out for public consumption at this point is just the staff recommended scenario, and TAC's job is to verify that the scoring was done appropriately, which I think we all can agree it was. So to me, I think it makes sense that we follow it almost exactly like smart scale, that the entire funding scenario and the scorecards get put out because they're not readily consumable by John Q taxpayer. I mean, there's some level of detail that somebody off the street's not going to understand anyway. So I don't know why we would want to treat this any different and dumb it down beyond what smart scale kind of already does with their scorecards. I know there's a lot more detail and history with the smart scale process, but I see a parallel that makes sense for this process to follow that. But then the second thing I want to add, and this would be a parking lot item for future discussion, just want to talk about it now while it's on my brain, is the PE category. Just looking at the scoring and how the cost benefit scores are astronomically high. I think there's probably a different way we could look at those, kind of like Darona, you were talking about the transit's not maybe accurately represented. Is PE scoring them the same way? Does that make sense? Because we're not actually getting the full benefit of the project itself. And we're getting, I think the cost benefits that were scored were 653 and 198. So I think maybe there's a different way we look at some of the categories, but we can obviously table that for future discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's just take a quick moment to consider what Austin is saying. And I think, what was I thinking about here? I think that I think the issue becomes with the staff recommendation and TAC with me is when we got to, I think we need to all the way solidify the process of selection. So, when we talked about you go to here, you don't have enough money and you skip, and then you do this, and then, hey, in order to get a transit project, we do this. Like all of those things are a little bit subjective because, and they're not defined that much maybe in the process. And now we get to these types of issues and things now because we don't have infinite amount of money and we can't fund everything on the list. So this is where we are. But again, I think we just have a lot of questions and we're trying to get those questions because like I said, I don't know if it would pass TAC. Us even recommending staff's recommendation. So I think that that's where we are. And it sounds like we do have some that are in favor of the recommendation as is. And then we'll soon call a vote, but we have more questions. Ms. Walker and then Ms. Inman.
Yeah, I don't want to revisit the framework in detail, but just a reminder that we were intentional about the scoring by category because we were critical of some of the inflexibility of the smart scale process, and that this was meant to be a data-driven starting point. And I think we're all on the same page there, that this is a staff followed the scoring per the framework, and this is where it shook out. And there is a reason that we categorize the scores and transit was pulled out and not everything was scored together because of the biases based on the measures and all of that. So just kind of revisiting that this is where we landed and it was meant to be a jumping off point for informing a decision. I'll leave it at that. Just a reminder.
Thank you. Ms. Inman?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I agree. I think you need to show it by category, but you need to just explain it, right? I mean, these are different modes. You've evaluated transit, against transit projects. I think the public will understand that, right? The other thing is, well, we completely agree that and support staff's, application of the framework and the scoring document. We still haven't been able to see the breakdown, right? So we still have questions about our scoring. So I just want to make sure that's clear that we're still good. We still need to ask questions. So while I think generally speaking, we absolutely agree, with how it was applied in staff's work, we still do have questions.
Thank you. Joe?
So I'd like to just go back to what we present and how we present it. And I do feel like we need to show what is being recommended. And there are a couple ways that could be done, but I feel like if we just put the entire list out there with scores, I don't think that many people are going to be able to appreciate that all those projects are not going to be funded. And so I think that the thing that we do as TAC is just absolutely play it straight and apply the current criteria, which sets these cutoff limits. I know they're recommendations as guidelines, but it's a function of how many of the value of the projects in each one of the categories. And you draw a line or you shade them green and say, if we apply the criteria, this would be the cutoff. Okay. And I think that might excite some people when they see that, okay, but I don't think we're gonna get much of a reaction if we just give them, if we just show the complete list and some scores. So what does that mean, really? What is somebody supposed to say about that particular list, right?
I agree. Even though those zeros are killing me on that list. I'm like, oh. And to say that it was, so yeah, that's why, okay. Oh, we have more hands up. Check.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate everyone's focus on this. This is a really good discussion. I think that kind of back to the point that Austin was making, and I think Joe just now to a certain extent, maybe if we present more than just the table, would it be helpful for people, or is it overkill to also show the scorecards and, to show the allocations table, to put all of that out there with some additional description? What I'm really concerned about is it's going to be hard enough to get the general public to look at a table and get invested in it. So I'm kind of also thinking about, what can we do to engage people and have people respond in a way that provides some new information to the elected officials when they have to make a decision. My concern about putting the full table of all the projects out is people are going to make assumptions in the general public that, we're going to fund 60 projects, and that's not the case. And then to come to a table when you have, your elected representatives from your jurisdiction saying, we're actually only going to support 15 projects. That's not going to, I don't want to put them in that position at the authority level. So I think we're moving towards some type of an understanding of where we need to be in terms of what's published. It's just a question of, what's enough, how much is enough.
Yeah, because even when I look at the expected award, we would have to explain that increase, because that expected award is really where you put it in the 6-year program and it gets the out year in there. And like none of that is explained. So I don't know again if the process would be, the request dollars, maybe we keep the highlighted green. I don't know what I'm hearing. But yeah, I think that's a bit of confusion just looking at the table. And then it may be worth saying like staff recommended award, like let you all take it.
That's fine.
But yeah, so I have Austin's hand up and then Todd.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think the cleanest thing to present is generally pages 20 through 25, because I do think the description adds a lot of value to the projects rather than just the scorecards. Because if you were to pull up the Fairground Road, Maidens Road extension for somebody that lives in Chesterfield County, they're going to wonder, or not the extension, but a roundabout. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it says what it is, but there's no idea as far as scope or how many legs of the roundabout or anything like that. So I think a description is definitely warranted. My recommendations for those 5 or 6 pages would be to add staff recommended awards to the title for all the pages. I'll let y'all take the bullet for it, but then I would, to kind of not have to explain away the difference between the expected award and the estimate and request, is to not have the estimate and request. You would have you would take pages 20 through 25, break it down into each category, have one column say category rank, maybe the score, and then what the expected award is. So you'd still have 3 columns, but you're showing them in order of each category and what their score was. And I guess if somebody does request it, they can come back to this meeting or request it from you guys as far as what those scores were and how we got there. But I do think we need to show the expected award, because I don't want folks to assume we're funding 60 projects when we certainly can't do that.
Thank you. Mr. Ewer and then Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So since we're focusing on what goes out to the public and what they can understand and not understand and what they provide back, Chet, can you remember, because I can't, what kind of feedback and what exactly we put out to the public in round two, all those 2 years ago, that seems like ages ago. Cause I'm fuzzy on what, I know we did get comments back, but I don't remember the nature.
Let me look for a minute or two, Madam Chair, if that's all right. I think we've got it.
Okay.
While he
Just-
look,
Okay,
Oh.
yeah. Yeah, Jessa.
real quick, while he's looking, maybe we could have, if we have the tables shown on 20 with some modifications to the column information, you could have a few bullets at the top, like for each header, benefit and benefit cost scores compared within each category. This is the CVTA staff recommended scenario pending tax review and recommendation to the, you could maybe just have some quick bullets at the top or at the bottom, like a legend.
Jessa, he was looking for something else. Why are you asking him some more questions?
No, that was for the group,
Oh, okay.
just a comment.
Okay, thank you. Amy?
Yeah, I agree with Chessa. I think that would be a good way of handling it. But I do want to clarify that we won't have another TAC meeting before this goes to the board, correct? So this will go out for public review. The next meeting is Finance Committee, which I think is next week. And then will they make the recommendation to the board? Or is it going to go to the board cold without a true endorsement? Because we're not endorsing the project, we're endorsing the process right now to go out for public review. So I guess just to be clear, who's actually making the recommendation to the policy board?
I would think it's probably gonna be the finance committee as they did last year.
Okay,
'Cause
that's
if
what I would
they're-
assume, but I just want it to go on record that that's how it's going to happen.
And
It's
I have
not-
to look back at, I don't have my notebook to look at the, all the way on the process, but I do know that, I think because of the dollar amounts, and that was just my only thing about the staff recommendation, because they haven't even seen it and it's gonna go to the public.
Mhm. Yeah, and if it looks like TAC has endorsed it, then it's going to appear that we've endorsed the rankings, and I'm not there yet, but I'm ready to put it out, I guess, with all of these caveats. And that's really just because of the timing. Right, we're under a timeline.
Chet,
Yes, thank you. I heard discussion of bullet points and things. Chessa, if that was you, can you put thoughts in the chat maybe? Because I wasn't able to write things down.
I can do that.
Okay. I went back, Madam Chair, and Todd found the public comment. We had a form which we would do again for the whatever was decided to put out for public review, and got a lot of comments on the projects that were shown. Many of those were active transportation focused and fall line focused, but there were mostly public comments, but there were also a handful of letters received for various projects that were in the table. So there wasn't any one. It didn't look like there was any one trend any one way, but people just responded to the list
and
overall.
what
So
list do
very
you have
similar to
that
what's here.
list? Yeah, I was gonna say, can we visually show that list? It's probably, I know it's in our tech, I mean, it's probably in the agendas on your CVTA page. But
It's very similar to what you see on page 20 to 25. Same type of thing. We didn't do
except for the expected award was on every project. Was that the case?
Let me see.
Sorry, we're getting older. Can't remember these pictures in our brain. I'm gonna hold off on Chessa. Sorry, Chet.
No, that's fine. Here. I think it was, just put a link in the chat. The tables are essentially the same thing. We had total estimate, total requested, and then proposed funding. So very similar to what you see here. The wording was a little bit different.
Thank you.
So you're looking at page, when you open it, 11 of 38.
But it didn't have the descriptions.
Not as detailed, no. There was an additional table farther down that had the descriptions. Page
okay.
13. Yeah.
Chessa?
So, let's see. Not to be a stickler, but y'all are probably gonna kill me. Let's see. So, in the framework doc relative to the public notice, can y'all see my screen? Hold on, share. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Scoring, ranking. Here. Staff did all that. These are the touch points. CVTA TAC will review staff's draft funding scenario, make revisions if necessary, and provide a recommended funding scenario to the authority requesting authorization for public review. Uh-huh. Ay, ay, ay.
The authority has already approved public review. So
So they have. That
Yes.
was
Oh, yeah.
Now-
So see, that's the difference then. Let's look
so
at that.
that's yeah. Okay.
We had done the funding scenario before now, and then we did the public review, and we just haven't had time
There hasn't
to
been
make
time.
revisions.
Nope.
Right.
We just got this last week. I mean, literally. There's not been time
Mm.
to do
And
that
we're
level of
all
work.
Going for the, it was the smart scale pre-application period is what we're shooting for.
that's right.
And that's March what?
It's like March
April,
1.
When is it? April?
April 1st is a deadline. I mean, it would be cutting it really close.
Yeah, but we still have March.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Can I just play devil's advocate? What is the additional work that needs to be done that we can support you guys in getting to a point where you're comfortable advancing something? I want to make this as light of a load for you as possible. Aside from applying the scoring according to the framework and laying it out like we have, what else would be useful to make a recommendation possible?
Well, I think, in my opinion, that tax review is, yes, one, and we probably always had this different, some people would have a different process thinking to it, but that TAC review, while we've made this document, when me just as a person looking at it, and we have regional priorities, and so I do think that the authority makes those decisions on the regional priorities. And so I think the disconnect is us working for each locality. If I'm not comfortable saying that this list, but we follow the process, but here's the list. Because then we're gonna put the work on them to try to figure out, okay, what makes the list work? So I do think that with TAC reviewing it, we work more together to see what that is. But I do understand that that then says we are putting subjectivity and not just technical. So I guess this is the dilemma that we're in right now is how do we present technical and the expectations that come with that, because you're going to put, hey, none of these projects are looking to be funded and these are the ones funded, and that's fine. Like, that is what it is. But the language in the, so our idea of, hey, this is staff recommendation, the policy says that it will be TAC recommendation. And so we're getting on, I don't know what else we might consider or even how to consider it. But I just know that, I don't know. Mr. Goin and then Mr. Ure.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe it's not, I don't want to say poorly worded in the guidance document, but maybe I've misunderstood it from the get-go, that I was always under the impression that TAC is the technical advisory committee and we're just reviewing the spreadsheet that the scoring worked, and we're kind of leaving the politics out of it because it's not really our job, so to speak. And you're talking to the guy that tried to make the political argument last year and had to make it at the full body. Didn't, tried unsuccessfully to make it here. I think we would end up never agreeing on a scenario if we had to make it correct, so to speak. So are there errors in the table? Yes. If so, fix them. No, if not, let's recommend the table because we followed the process. That's my position on this.
Thank you. Mr. Ure?
I kind of agree with Austin on that. I don't think you're going to get a concurrence from the technical advisory group on the recommended funding scenario. It was in terms of whether we support the actual projects as opposed to the process. It was relatively easy last time because we were, with a few tweaks here and there, able to fund all the requests. So that made life a lot easier. But I don't think we're close this time if you kind of size up, what some of the regional priorities are for Henrico, and is our understanding some of the regional priority projects for the other localities. So I think that's going to be a futile exercise if we try to accomplish that either today or even with a special call TAC meeting. So maybe we should pivot back and focusing on, like Austin said, is the technical, where all the technical process is met. Can we endorse it as long as that's clearly defined and explained and what's put out to the public? To Chester's point about the bullets, then I think maybe that's the best we can hope for.
Sounds good. Chester?
I agree. Technical, we're signing off that it was fun. Now, Amy had some questions on her scores, and that is
Yeah, I do.
technical. So that would need to be maybe.
I'm just
her-
making that a caveat. Yeah, thank you, Tess. I'm making that as a caveat because I'm going to be following up on those. So I don't want to put out a vote of endorsement and then come back and have questions, because I want to put it out there that we have questions. But I don't know that it's necessarily going to significantly change anything, but we want to be clear, right? It might. And I do think I'm comfortable with what Austin was saying in terms of showing the tables as in those 20 to 25, but putting in both the benefit and the cost and the benefit cost score priority rankings. I think that would be helpful just so people understand. And I think that in and of itself, without the highlighting, will allow people to understand where the scores fell, right? How the project's ranked. I think people are pretty smart. They can figure that out if it's on a table that's pretty self-explanatory with the bullets that Chessa mentioned. I could support all that.
So I think we still, it seems like a color issue.
Mm-hmm.
So would you still be without the color, but the recommended amount on the right-hand side? Do you support that as well? Because that's what right now where we are with the funding scenario is that while they may not be highlighted, if we take the highlight off, it would still have an expected column of funding. That's what Austin and Chessa are,
Debating. Mhm.
no,
I'm
they're
inclined to
agreeing
leave it
with.
off
They're
because,
agreeing.
again, we're doing the policies, board's work. If we put that on there, because ultimately they have the final say. I think if we show the rankings, at the end of the day, they're the ones that are gonna approve the programming of the money. So,
But the
um,
guidance, the policy says that we have to recommend the allocation to a project. Which would be that list, the highlighted items, that would be the only way, unless you just, yeah, they would, the only way. The only good part, we want all those projects up there for the public review, but. Mr. Ewer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going back to the transit list and the fact that the downtown transfer hub has goose eggs across the scores there. I'm wondering if that's gonna mislead the public into thinking the project has zero benefit. When we know it does. I don't know how we fix that. I mean, I understand Miles's explanation that it's relative, but if you look at the lowest project in the other categories, they did have at least some numbers on them.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I was gonna look at that. Thank you.
Hey, real quick, one question. I see in the motion that or in the agenda on page 19, that the public comment period is supposed to open on the 8th. Chet, are you guys able to revise and send a draft new table around before then for staff concurrence via email? Is that possible?
Austin, if we're adding columns and changing formats, absolutely.
Because it sounds like I think generally we're all okay with some form of pages 20 through 25 being sent out. I guess that's the group of pages we're trying to send. We're just thinking on what information's on there. Do I have that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I guess I could reconcile to putting the list out with highlights and maybe not the allocation amount, or,
Mm,
I think we have
that
to have
would
an
at least
allocation.
provide an emphasis on those projects. As it relates to how they fell out with the scoring without putting the number on. I mean, you could put an estimated award year and just put that without I mean, I don't know, but I think that I'm a little reluctant to put the amount on just because if the list changes, then what does that do? From when the policy board gets it.
Chet and then Joe?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just for a little clarification for what the authority is going to be looking at, they're going to be approving the allocations table. Their concerns are not really with the scorecards. The allocations table needs to show the award though, and the year that they're slotted in. So that's what's being worked up. So I think it's important to show the amount, just because that's what they're ultimately going to be ending up approving. The format, I think, like we're talking about, we can work with, but the amount, I think, is pretty important to show.
Joe?
Yeah, I do too, real quickly. I don't see, I'm trying to understand why we wouldn't show the amount. That's what's,
Yeah.
that's
right.
what the results, that's what the policy has led us to.
And the expected award then, Chet, was the correlation needed for the allocation table to be smoothed over to the entire board, right?
That's correct.
All right, everybody. We've been on here an hour and 40 minutes almost. We need to.
Well, I do have one more question, I guess, it's because what I was sort of led to believe the other day was that we would receive the list, it would go out to public comment, and then the policy board would really be the one that would come up with the list, of projects. And So that's, I mean, that's different, right, than what I'm hearing now. What I'm hearing now is they're just gonna approve the allocation table, which assumes that we've already vetted all of the projects and that we're good with those amounts. So that's a much different scenario than what I was led to believe last week.
And I think the allocation table comes where, Chet. So you're trying to introduce the allocation table to the finance committee?
Ideally, yes. If I can, I'll address Amy's comment just now. I mean, the easiest thing for the authority to react to is something that's put in front of them, ready to go, right? The discussion does not need to end up being, okay, we're going to accept all of these allocations without discussion or without any changes. But what it does give them is an understanding ahead of time that this is where things would slot out if you approved the framework scoring just as it worked out. What they can come back during the meeting and do, and they've done this multiple times, is say, no, we're focused on regional collaboration. We'd like to move project X up to project C and make that change, and then say, staff, make it work. And that's when we all scramble after the fact and try and figure out how to change the funding to make that scenario happen. So I mean, it's going to be a super dynamic meeting, but it doesn't mean that it's decided when we go in, as nice as that would be.
Mhm. Well, that's where I think I think it's okay that we're endorsing the process, but not necessarily the list of recommendations. Whether you want to put the numbers on there or not, you know, I'll concede to the group on that.
All right, we have some things in the chat. Let's see, my recommendation, Austin says, is have the bullet points actually be column headings.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just a way to make the table work, but if we can get a draft circulated, I think we'll get there.
Okay. So we're looking for a motion from TAC to recommend the candidate projects and recommended awards list. To the finance committee? Or to who are we approving this list to?
There is no, that's a great question. There is no real direct flow of work. I think the TAC would make a recommendation, then the finance committee would make a recommendation. It doesn't necessarily flow from one to the other. It's kind of a concurrent action. So we would take tax action today and show that to the finance committee and then have them make their own. Would be
Okay,
my recommendation.
okay, we have one hand up. Nora?
Sorry to keep this going. I was trying to follow along the conversation, and this may have already been said. It probably was already said. Amy probably said it. But in the column, it says CVTA request dollars. Should we include how much the project actually is? I know we have the benefit score, but so that people know that this is a leveraging request and that, you know, we're asking for 2 million, but it's actually a $20 million request. Should that be included? And again, I'm sorry if you already asked.
That's a good clarification.
Madam Chair, I think the challenge, and just not trying to complicate things, but the challenge is, again, we have estimates in current dollars and the expected award column would be in future inflated dollars. So I think Austin's intent was to try and line it all up, that we're only reporting in one set of dollars or the other. And we haven't gone through the exercise of putting a future estimate on projects that didn't shake out in the scoring because they didn't go into an allocation spreadsheet at the end of the day. So we could do that, but it would just be a lot more of a lift, and we have to assume years that don't actually relate to anything because it's not tied to a funding scenario.
But I think what Nora maybe was asking is just to put on there if it's a leveraging request or not, like the total amount, and then what is this being leveraged? You know, is the $2 million a leverage of $20 million? Or, you know, so you don't have to necessarily inflate it to year of expenditure, but, you know, show total amount and then what you're asking for leverage from CVTA. Is that it? Kind of.
It says it's in today's dollars, not funding year dollars, so that people understand. But if I'm the finance committee and I see I can give a project, and I understand it's in the benefit score, but I can give a project 2 million, but I'm actually getting a $20 million project, or I can give a project 2 million and then it'll score better on smart scale, which is what we really want. That to me sounds like a better project than someone who wants me to put in 50, 75, 100% towards this project. That's all. Sorry for dragging you out.
No problem.
That's a really good point, Nora, because actually what they're being scored, what they're actually receiving is more than what's being allocated.
So again, so what we're saying is that we're preparing this list as technical people, and here's the list, even if then the finance committee comes and change the entire list. So did we make a bad list, or just the process? Is the process bad?
I think we
Parking
have
lot.
fundamental things that need to be looked at in terms of the process. I think there are fundamental things that we can't address right now that are serious questions that this group needs to have conversations about.
And so we feel comfortable moving this, voting on this, recommending it. It's not going to be a staff recommendation. It's going to ultimately be a TAC recommendation. Or do
On
we?
process.
Okay, on the process.
I mean, we're not, again, process, this is how it shook out. Staff has put it in the years of allocation to put the funding program together. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're endorsing it. That means we're accepting that staff did what was requested and what was approved. And the process needs to move forward into the public realm and to the finance committee.
Okay, we have plenty of hands. Chet, Nora, were you finished? I think she is. Chet, and then Todd, and then Austin.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to be clear that what is being asked of the authority ultimately, and what we want the public to review, is not the scoring. As much as we're all, you know, getting excited about the scoring and the metrics, the public is being asked to review the draft funding scenario, which is really focused on, here's a project, here's how much money we're going to put on it. That's really all that we're asking for public feedback on. So I think the recommendation obviously could be whatever you want, but what we want to put out for the public needs to be focused on the funding scenario, and that's kind of what's shown in the the draft press release on page 19.
Let me go to that.
I mean, it's very basic. There's not a lot there, but
all right, let me get some more hands. I was just reading that memo. Todd, and then Austin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So reading your language on page 19, Chad, it says the CVTA staff and members assess the project's merit, cost, regional value before determining a draft slate of final project commitments. Is members of what? The CVTA authority, the technical advisory committee? Because we're now saying this is a staff recommendation, right? And the TAC is, as I'm sensing, is okay with saying that the process was followed, that this list is a result of that, following that process, and we support sending out to the public. But I think we, at least personally, I would want to caveat it that this is not a TAC recommendation of project funding, and that needs to be clearly communicated when this moves forward to the finance committee and ultimately the authority that TAC approved the analysis and the list of projects as developed by staff for public comment, and leave it at that.
Happy to make that change if that's, so it would just say CVTA staff assessed, blah, blah, blah. Sure.
So I guess, okay, Austin, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I know I made a comment earlier about removing the estimate, and because of the confusion, and I know Goochland's projects is one of them, that the award is higher than the estimate. But I actually think we do a good job on the current table of qualifying that with a bullet or the little asterisk at the bottom that just says the difference is based on inflation. So I think making sure that that remains, maybe even bring a little more attention to that star at the bottom of the page, just to explain that away, because I could see that being an immediate question. I mean, I know I certainly would have asked the question if I knew inflation was not a part of the initial scoring and whatnot. So with that, I would suggest we leave on the total cost estimate.
And thank you, Austin. So I was just thinking, you know, maybe something like, I think you do good on that page 19, but a little bit more of the disclaimer. Because I guess ultimately, when I think about it, what was I thinking we could add? Are we, I don't know, maybe it's a memo to the finance committee from the TAC, that we yield to them with this list our concerns. I don't know, because to me, just like sending something through, acting like it's perfect, I don't know. I don't like, we present something, then they change it, and then this, I don't know. But I know they can, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just not used to that, that happens like with VDOT all the time, but Amy?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess that's a good point that, I mean, the public should have the ability to look at all of the projects and see the merits of all of the projects, right? So if they're just looking at a funding plan, then we're sort of doing their work. I mean, we've stole their thunder. We're saying just tell us if we're right or wrong. Well, how do they know if we're right or wrong? I mean, without seeing that detail. So for me, as a member of the public, I would want to see, okay, here's the range of projects, here's how they scored, here's now how we're ranking them. Give us your feedback on that. And that's what I thought we were doing. But now what I'm hearing is we're putting out a funding plan that has already recommended 9 projects and various transit and bike ped projects. And that's what we're asking them to comment on. That's what I'm hearing now. So I want to hear what the public has to say on all the projects. I think they deserve to see it and should have an opportunity to provide input on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
I appreciate that comment. I guess that gives me a chance to ask for clarity on the table. So there's been discussion about what should be included. So what I understand now, based on Austin's clarification a minute ago, is that the information in the table that's currently on page 20 is good, but we should also do the following things. We should sort and divide it by category. And then we should also add columns for benefit score and cost benefit score. And then leave everything else. Am I hearing all that correctly, or please let me know if there's something I'm not understanding.
I think
And would
that's,
that satisfy, Amy, would that satisfy your concern about being able to see how everything ranked against each other?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, that would satisfy my concern as long as, you know, they're able to see everything, not just with the recommended funding plan. Right?
and that's
Or
why we
what
put
you're,
the whole table out though. We put the
yeah,
whole list. And I think we do that on purpose for
Yep.
the one allow the authority to have that flexibility.
correct.
So
And that's
yeah,
what we're voting on, right? Is to put that overall list out for public comment and to go forward to finance committee for their review. And they're going to make their own recommendation based on what they see and what they know. And then ultimately that's what will go to the board on, what is it, February 28th or something?
23rd.
23rd? Okay.
I only remember because it's my birthday.
Now we'll know how to have a party.
Yeah. Mr. Yor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So since we won't have a chance to see the revised one of these before we take action and before this needs to go to the public check, can you tell us exactly what's in each of these columns that's going to be modified on these pages 20 through 26 or whatever it is, before somebody can make a motion and we can move on?
I don't know how to word the motion, Todd, but if you can figure out the language, I'm happy to revise the table and send it out by email for everybody to say yes or no on tomorrow. But I can verbally describe what's in it. So
I think that would be good.
Okay. The verbal description. Okay, so it's the table that you see in the packet on page 20. Project title, sponsor are the same. And then we have a category column, which will be sorted. We'll say alphabetically. So you'll see all your bike ped projects first, and then all your next category, et cetera, your bridges. The description, and then we will have a category rank, both by benefit score and cost benefit score. So there'll be category rank for each of those. And then the three remaining columns you see there. So the current dollar estimate, the current dollar request, and the expected award with the asterisk that goes to the inflation note. And then I also have footnotes from Chesa to add that the project benefit and benefit cost rank are by category, and that the final funding scenario is to be determined by the authority.
And you could lump that in with the inflation note, make it bigger and make it stand out.
Okay.
Thank you. And would there also be the green shading for the recommended projects?
Yes. Just for clarity. I mean, we're putting the amount in there as well, but I think the green shading would.
But yeah, but if we have the
everybody who's
expected
reviewing it.
award only and not the shading, we won't bring as much attention. But you leave the expected award amount over there, so you're going to see one on top of it doesn't have any money and one does, so that one must have gotten funded.
Yeah,
We're not trying to make it more confusing, Madam Chair.
I think it should be one or the other. I would lose the green. Just
Yeah, we're keeping the
for
expected
friendly
award.
compromise.
Yeah, we're keeping the expected award.
Yeah, I think for a
So-
friendly compromise, lose the green.
Okay.
And then on page 19, Chet, it says that sentence that was brought up about together the CVTA staff and members. So are you crossing out them and members?
That's going to say the CVTA staff assess the
Assess.
project's merit costs, et
Okay, I
cetera.
just want to make sure. All right, I think we're ready. Do we have a motion to recommend? Let me see some language here. So we're looking for an approval of the draft regional funding scenario 3 for public review. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Amy. We have a
I'll
motion.
second.
And we have a second. Let's do a roll call to commemorate the 2 hours or one. Well, I don't even know how many hours. Ms. Scott. Oh, wait, Mr. Your
Looks
discussion.
like might be discussion, yep.
Yeah, can you call the question, please, Madam Chair?
Yes, sir. You mean the question in regard to the motion?
Yeah, well, you take comments now.
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, thank you for talking.
Just a clarification. So I heard Amy say friendly amendment to remove the green shading. So is that the motion that's on the table without the green shading or with the green shading?
Without.
I was assuming it was without when I moved for the motion.
All right, I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, good clarification.
Any other questions? Great. Ms. Scott, could you do a roll call vote, please?
Yes, ma'am. Miss Amos? Do we still have, we may have lost some people. Mr. Mitchell?
Mm.
Miss Walker?
Aye.
Mr. Goyne?
Aye.
Mr. Vadunez?
Aye.
Mr. Yor?
Aye.
Miss Inman?
Aye.
And Chair Clark?
I need a point of clarity. Kill me. Miles, are you adjusting the zeros on the transit project, or is that just zeros?
No, there'll just be the explanation if needed to this cost benefit within the category to overview the whole,
But
how all the scorecards work.
But what Todd was saying in regard to the bottom project and other categories weren't zero.
Right. So what that is there's multiple subcomponents of each of those. So, if safety has both total crashes and crash rate. So if you don't score at the bottom on one of those, you could still have a little bit of points. It's just the BRT relative to the downtown transfers, a huge scale of difference on all of those projects.
Okay, thank you. Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Oh, y'all killing me. All right, let's go to item 9, FY 25-24 quarterly expenditure reports. Mr. Parsons?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. You all have done your work for the day, so I just wanted to point your attention to page 26 in the agenda. This is what we have in terms of quarterly reporting. So just for your review, and if you do have any projects that need to be included here that aren't, please reach out to me and let me know. We've gone through second quarter. As much has been reported. I know there's still some others that need to submit. So we'll just keep updating this as we receive new information.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, I have no comments. Do we have any member comments? So, great. So hearing none.
Nora has her hand up.
Oh, who does?
Do you have a comment? Could we request that we add a process review for what we just went through in like the April, May meeting agenda, since it's fresh on our minds, and I have I didn't speak up a lot, but I agreed with a lot of y'all said. I think it needs some improvement. And so if we could go ahead and add that to our agenda.
And I wrote
Thank you.
down some parking lot things.
Awesome. Thank you. We will. Any others? Chat, when's our next meeting?
March 11th is the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. So our next meeting will be on March 11th. With that, and not hearing any others, thank you all so much for your hard work today. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
your hard
all.
work.